Hello, I'm Sam Mason, a Policy Officer at the Public and Commercial Services Trade Union, a union that's proudly opposed to nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. I'm also a Labour Party member and a C&D member, as well as a member of the new Lucas Plan project. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to C&D for this opportunity to say a few words here about the current COVID pandemic and what we can learn from this in opposing UK nuclear weapons. The need to continue to press for defence diversification and for socially and ecologically useful production as a response to the climate and social economic crisis. Sadly, this global health crisis will be a defining moment of our times for many reasons. One will be the many lives unnecessarily lost in what some have framed as a war against a hidden enemy. But equally sadly, this enemy is arguably one of humanity's creation in our government's destructive desire for power and control over people's lives, nature, the planet, and economic wealth of the few. Nuclear weapons, of course, are the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, in which we have invested at the expense of making ourselves less able to protect workers and population against this pandemic, as we've so sadly seen played out in the past few weeks in the lack of personal protective equipment, ventilators, and the health and social care services. With years of underfunding of the health and social care services and manufacturing capability, it's time to end the continuing wastes of billions of pounds on unnecessary and ineffectual nuclear defence system, which has long been argued by C&D and which we've supported. The billions that will be invested in the Trident Renewal Programme, for example, could be better spent within our public services, health services, education services, and beyond that. As retired nuclear submariner Commander Robert Forsyth, and supporter of the Move the Nuclear Weapons Money campaign, said in the Joint Letters to Parliament on the 1st of April, it's completely unacceptable that the UK continues to spend billions of pounds in deploying and modernising the Trident nuclear weapons system when faced with the threats to health, climate change and world economies that coronavirus poses. The COVID crisis has put into sharp perspective, if it was ever needed, where economic and social priorities lay. But as we know, are so tragically misdirected. But we also know that we cannot argue for an end to nuclear weapons and the structure that support them without offering a way out for workers which guarantees social protections and alternative forms of work that also values workers' skills. And it is quite right that trade unions with members in the defence sector seek a guarantee on this and argue that there needs to be something such as a Defence Diversification Agency or the mechanisms in place before that this can even be considered. In 2017, the TUC Congress passed a motion calling on the Labour Party to establish a shadow defence diversification agency, which would be aligned with an overall national industrial strategy, including the possibility of conversion of defence capacity. The point of such an agency would be to see defence diversification as part of a wider plan that redirected our resources towards things we need to ensure a safe and secure society for all. If ever, this demand is more relevant than ever. Working with trade unions, it would enable a process to discuss their members' needs and capabilities and to listen to the ideas of workers for practical alternative plans, providing retraining where needed to enable redeployment into new jobs, including the social care sector, whilst protecting employment and pay levels. The very call to arms that Unite have been calling on the government to do in supporting the repurposing of manufacturing to make urgently needed personal protection equipment. It is widely recognised that defence jobs have been declining for some time with increased capitalisation. Therefore, managed transition into socially useful work, which would help to ensure communities aren't devastated in the same way as we've seen across deindustrialised sectors in the 1980s and 1980s, will be a way to ensure that, as I said, workers are protected. And of course, there's scepticism about it. Under the Blair government, the Defence Diversification Agency was created, but of course that was quickly privatised to bring private companies' products to market, and didn't see the kind of transitional demands that have long been argued for, both within the Labour Party and with trade unions going back to the 70s, with many well-articulated documents showing how this would be possible. But of course, there is one experience in history which just show us how we can come up with alternative plans and where the ideas for socially useful production emanate from. In the 1970s, faced with redundancies in Lucas Aerospace, where 50% of its work was defence related, shop stewards combined to develop an alternative corporate plan in defence of their jobs. What was significant about the plan as a defining legacy of the labour movement, and which we have long celebrated, if not supported in the terms of what it put forward, was the advancement beyond a traditional narrow economism response to one that questioned the products workers were making, the impacts on society, and the very labour process and the way they were made. It's too complex to go in this short time, the very elaborate process that the shop stewards went through and how they organised across their unions and members. But in brief, the plan consists of 150 product proposals that were the result of a consultation by shop stewards and responded to things that society needed, such as wind turbines and kidney machines, things that would help save lives, not destroy them. Also in the thinking was obviously recognising that with the introduction of new automated processes, that actually it was workers that embodied the skills, the knowledge and skills of workers were actually being embodied in those machines. So therefore, everything about the production process needed to be considered in terms of people and the impact on them and the environment outside. So not just what was being made, but also how it was being made and how it's going to be used. Unfortunately, the plan was not supported by the company, the Labour Party, or the bureaucracy of trade unions. But it did, however, become a campaign for the right to work on socially useful technologies, and it's not just an idea whose time has come, but is critical now in how we go forward through and beyond the COVID crisis. A crisis that has turned arguments on their head about low-skilled workers and the essential role underpaid healthcare and support workers, including cleaners, shop workers, council workers, and so on, do. It has shown that markets cannot provide the solutions we need and that state intervention is a necessary part of managing our economies and societies, and that we can repurpose our production facilities to produce things societies need, such as PPE, even if that's far from efficient. And obviously we've got the examples where manufacturers and through the ventilator challenge have been pulled together with defence contract manufacturers such as Babcock in producing ventilators, and this is clearly initiatives that we have to see continued rather than a return to the destructive weapons of mass destruction and death that they were creating in some cases. It's also slightly ironic to see that the Excel Centre in East London, which is traditionally used to host the Global Arms Fair, was repurposed as one of the first hospitals to actually deal with serious cases of patients. But I think it's also worth pointing out that this is linked obviously to the wider crisis that we see around automation and the climate crisis. On the 29th of January, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists issued an alarming statement to leaders and citizens of the world titled Closer Than Ever. It is 100 seconds to midnight. This was in recognition that the risk to civilization in the natural world is currently extremely high, leaving little margin for error in how we address it. The COVID crisis is, of course, not a crisis we would wish for to change our trajectory and how we move towards a more socially and ecologically productive society. But it has been in part of our own making. Therefore, the best we can do for those particularly who have lost their lives through this, to ensure that we make use of this unplanned for abrupt stop to our economic activities, to reassess and build a plan that will address the crisis that still very much remains of increased militarisation, climate change and automotive destruction. It is welcome that in naming his first shadow cabinet, the new Labour leader Keir Starmer has retained the position of Shadow Minister for Peace and Disarmament, and Fabian Hamilton along with it. It is also welcome to read that Angela Rayner, as Deputy, will maintain the 2019 manifesto commitments to a new internationalism and a world free of nuclear weapons, including opposing Trident renewal. But what we do need to do is to ensure that we get a firm commitment from the new Labour leadership and continue to lobby for the establishment of that Shadow Defence Diversification Agency. We may have a new team, but we need to take forward the discussions that were already developed post-2017 and continue with those, and particularly within this new context of the COVID crisis. We need to build a new zero-carbon economy based on socially and ecologically useful production, working with trade unions and all workers to create new secure jobs as a response to social and economic crisis, and that doesn't return to the precarious and low paid kinds of work that we've seen many had to suffer, and many who will be losing their jobs, dumped out of industries in the early days of the crisis, which will be faced coming ahead with the severe recession that's predicted. But I don't think we should talk about war and use war analogies. We need to talk about peace. We need to use the ideas from the Lucas Plan and the discussions we're having now to create our own plan for workers and communities. We have a chance to turn back the doomsday clock, end the nuclear threat and tackle climate change. We have to build on what just a few weeks ago seemed impossible to make possible. Thank you.